Absolutely delighted that you are on here this evening.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. That's Kevin's a hard act to follow, I think.
Yeah,
Very
he
interesting.
does put his words together very succinctly and engagingly.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to be very careful how I speak here. I don't want to pick up the English accent because I was there for a couple of times, and it's funny. After spending a week in London and Liverpool and running around with some guys over there, you come home with that little accent. You start calling women love, and they want to slap you and things like that. So you guys do things a little different over there.
When I came back from my hometown for 17 years and I saw people in the shop, a man was buying the newspaper and he was like, "Oh, thanks, love." And I was so surprised after being out of the country. It was like reverse culture shock.
Yeah, I called my boss as soon as I got back, and his wife answered the phone, and I called her love. That's not good.
So, Perry, would you like to tell the viewers a little bit about you then? What led you to getting involved in the crime genre?
Well, my dad was a cop. I grew up in a law enforcement family. My dad, my uncle, both were cops in Wichita, Kansas. I became a cop in '81 on kind of a fluke. I'd had some run-ins with law enforcement and was kind of going the other direction. You probably know a little bit about that. And my dad kind of challenged me. I made a comment about a cop who had accidentally killed a young kid with a shotgun. And he grabbed me and pulled me nose to nose and says, "You think you can do any blankety blank better? Get your butt out there and do it." So I tested, and by some fluke, they hired me. And so I did about 35 years in law enforcement. Also had a brother that followed my tracks at Colorado Springs Police Department. I retired from there. Then I went to a small town in Nebraska where I was a chief for 17 years. And I retired a little over a year ago.
Wow, you must have a wealth of stories then. And one that we're going to start out with is JonBenet Ramsey. What got you interested in that?
Well, we were in Colorado Springs. I was in the homicide unit in Colorado Springs when JonBenet was killed, December of '96. I think my first real interest, other than the normal person's interest from the media, was a Crime Stoppers line call that came in. And the Crime Stoppers phones were manned by volunteers. My cubicle happened to be right next to the Crime Stopper door. And somebody called with a tip on the JonBenet Ramsey case. And the call taker panicked because it was a pretty serious call. Comes out of the room and he asked me to take the call. So I did. And this is what I remember from 25 years ago. A real stern voice starts out with, "Listen carefully." I've already repeated this once. "Listen carefully," I think were the first words. It says, JonBenet was killed accidentally during a pedophile sexual ritual. And she was killed accidentally by a garrote. Now, I'm like, oh my God, we hadn't had anything to do with the case. We're 2.5, 3 hours away from Boulder. My boss wanted me just to pass that information on to Boulder by phone, and I took a while to get a detective that was working the case on the phone. But the point was, at the time, and still to this day, is the press had not released anything about any kind of pedophile ring or anything along that line, or the garrote. That had not been mentioned in the press. The public was not aware of that. So I think when I called Boulder and passed it on to them, basically they were shocked that I knew about the garrote, because only the investigators working the case would have been aware of that. So I became pretty intrigued by the case at that point. Plus, you may or may not be familiar with Lou Smith, who was formerly a Colorado Springs homicide detective. He had left, retired, and gone to the sheriff's office, left there, and went up to Boulder and worked on the case. And I was a pretty good friend of his. So I had numerous conversations with Lou Schmidt, who didn't agree with Boulder's theory that it was the family, that the Ramseys had done this. He had the intruder theory, and there's been a couple of specials done on him trying to cover his intruder theory. And of course, I told him what I had heard, and he says, "Yeah, I remember seeing that in the case," but he blew it off. He never would buy that. So that was pretty much my interest. I still have mixed feelings about what might have happened. And I did a YouTube video on pretty much what I just told you, and it went crazy for my little channel. And I think I kind of got shadow banned or something. I kind of went from like the top of the queue when someone would put JonBenet in to where I couldn't even find my own video. And that could have just been analytics, something maybe graphic that I said, that got kicked me back. But I went from being in the top 10 in the queue to 250 or something. So I built up like 120 views in maybe 4 or 5 weeks to where I was getting, 10 views a day. What the heck happened? Anyway, that's what I know about JonBenet, other than I've had 2 experts that I've personally dealt with over the ransom note. One is 100% sure that Patsy wrote that note. The other one wouldn't commit to that. Talk more about the personality of the person that wrote the note. But there's just as many experts with the same qualifications as Marcel Effler's. That's the handwriting expert that is 100% sure that Patsy wrote it. There's just as many experts on the other side that say she didn't write it. So we don't know. The ransom note is a mysterious part. The theory of a intruder is curious. The fact that the garrote was used and would be something that could be used in a sexual ritual takes me right back to my phone call. So that's, really my involvement, other than a lot of conversations with Lou Smith.
Who's at the top of your suspect list?
I really don't. I don't know that I have a suspect. People email me with their theories, and some of them are very interesting. I'm not going to go as far as to throw out a name, but I do think it was a sexual perverted act that caused her death. I'm not buying that mom or the older brother conked her over the head and then they panicked and had to cover it up. I'm not buying that part of it. I think there was someone else involved.
And is the probability that it was somebody that she knew?
Yes, that's one of the theories, yes.
Have you looked at parallels in the Madeleine McCann case?
A little bit. I think there's some curious things with John Ramsey. I think he used one of the female attorneys that Ghislaine Maxwell had used in the past. That's kind of curious. There's also a photograph at one of the pageants where there's a woman in the background that a lot of people think is Maxwell. Can't say that it is. It does look like her. So I don't know if we'll ever know.
You got a question from a viewer, Mumzilla. Has anything been uncovered about the actual paedophile ring that would use the famous children in their rituals? I have read that her father has been connected to a big pedo ring.
I know there's a lot of stuff on the internet alleging those kind of things. And I think that's basically what the phone call was trying to get across. The guy hung up on me really quick. I think he was worried that the call might be traced. So there were a number of people involved, high-level people, Hollywood, DC, wealthy people, I think are the three things he mentioned. And the garrote, which was shocking, and the fact that there was some kind of ritual abuse going on. And it was an accident, which I think is interesting.
Wow. Okay, so a murder case, Miss Berry victim, George Cliff McDaniel suspect, who ran to the UK, and you were sent to work with Scotland Yard over here.
Yeah, yeah.
So what happened with that case?
Got a little helmet while I was there. Missy Berry was the victim of that case. This was back in '94, September of '94. She worked at a little fast food place, and so did Cliff McDaniel, George Cliff McDaniel. They both worked there. She's leaving work, closing the business, and Cliff approaches her and asks for a ride. He's on a payphone. This is back when we had a payphone outside hanging on the building. He's on this payphone. And when Missy drives out, and she's got the money to go to make the bank deposit, about $600. A uniformed cop actually pulls into the parking lot and witnesses Cliff get off of the phone and get into the car, hollers Missy, and she stops and he asks for a ride. So we have a uniformed officer who worked that sector actually see him get into her car. 10 minutes later, she's found in the driver's seat, car running at a stoplight, car in gear, and she's been shot point blank in the face. And it's about 100 yards from his apartment. Anyway, long story short, he obviously became a primary suspect. We interviewed him for hours and hours till the early morning hours. And he promptly, the next morning, went paid cash for a plane ticket to London, and then somehow ended up in Liverpool, where he had an aunt, I believe. And so I got to come over and work with Scotland Yard, who actually made the arrest. I got a warrant together. We sent it to Her Majesty's Court, and Scotland Yard picked him up for me. So I was treated like a king, I'll tell you. I got off the plane. I've never had somebody with the sign Freeman. And I was taken by one of the cabs right to Scotland Yard. Well, taken to my hotel first. And they wouldn't let me stay in the hotel that my department was going to put me up in. When I talked to Jean-Pierre Letizier, was the constable that I worked with. He says, no, you're not staying there. And Scotland Yard put me up in the Tower Hotel, which is a nice place. And they took great care of me. Practically got me in trouble while I was there, but it was an experience. And we're still friends.
Well, I grew up in a little town just outside of Liverpool. What did you make of the accent?
Of the accent?
Yeah, of the Liverpudlians, the Scousers.
Yeah. Well, we took a train up there. I met in London. Next morning, we got on a train and went up to Liverpool. And the local authorities, who had actually made the arrest, and Jean-Pierre had gone up and brought him back and put him in prison waiting extradition. There was quite a group waiting for us at a pub, of course. And I don't know that I can remember a big difference in the accent, but they sure know how to party in Liverpool. We had a late night there. There was a female investigator and a couple of males, and then the two of us. And some great music, and a lot of pints went down that night, and experience. And then, of course, the next day we tried to interview people, but they basically would not cooperate. They wouldn't talk to me at all.
Okay, so how did you infiltrate the biker gang? How easy was that? Did you have to, really get down and dirty and pretend to take drugs?
Not pretend to take drugs necessarily. I worked undercover narcotics for quite a while. The biker thing was kind of a chain of events, and if any one of the links of that chain hadn't been there, I would have never got in. I'm doing a series on my channel. I think I've done 5 episodes, how I first got started toward the bikers. And so if anybody wants to watch those, some people think they're great, some people think they're boring. But it was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. Started out with a wealthy local personality who was on TV all the time with his commercials for his business. And he got caught in a hotel room with a couple of working girls and a bunch of cocaine. And their handler showed up, and there was a shootout, and they all got away. He's left in the room with a bullet hole in his Mercedes and the cocaine in his room. And anyway, he needed to work off his charges. I got assigned to work with him. We started going to the clubs, and most of the clubs were kind of controlled by the biker group. A lot of the dancers are kind of under their watch. So that was the first step. That led me to another biker. And then I brought some Hells Angels in from California. So I was seen again in those same bars with Hells Angels. So the local club started thinking I was the real deal. And it was just one thing after another. And then I met a professional informant who did nothing but specialize in bikers. And he would get rotated from department to department. He would go in, they'd clean up a club, and they would find another department for him to go. And I worked with him for a while. And he got me in really tight. I got to the point that I was, prospecting to become a member of the local club.
Wow. Any hairy moments?
Yeah, a few. Yeah. Got challenged a few times.
And what do you do when you get challenged in that situation?
Well, you just have to stand up to them. My biggest challenge from them was right away when I first started going to the clubs and being able to sit at their table. I was offered any of the dancers that I was interested in. And so you can't do the drugs, and you obviously can't do the dancers either. But I was invited to stay after hours one night after all the gawkers were pushed out. And I was approached by this lady, and then, she expected me to go with her. And that evolved to, I couldn't do it. And one of the guys that handled the girls jumped out of his stool and came over and, kind of grabbed me, and we're kind of just in a little shoving match for a second. And a couple of the guys jumped in and broke it up. And they told me, I need to get the heck out of there. That was the only physical time. After we made the arrests, which kind of goes to what Kevin was talking about a little bit, I was getting in really deep, and I was going to start transporting methamphetamine from Colorado back to like Illinois and Indiana, which is outlaw country, not the Sons. And that's who I was in with. And during my late nights in these clubs, the local boss, as they call them, started appearing. And when his name started appearing in my reports, I came in and one of the FBI agents was there. And he says, I need you to wrap up this, do your warrants. We're going to kick everything in. We think we know where the lab is. And I've been providing them with chemicals for the lab through DEA. And we thought we knew where the lab was. And I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think that person's name appearing in the reports was, as I think Kevin mentioned, you maybe said you're right over the target. And they told me to wrap it up. And I was just maybe halfway where I thought I could take the club. So that always kind of bothered me, but it worked out. I got just about every other job I tried for because of what I had done there. I think that helped my career.
Just got a few minutes left. Just wanted to go over what you're doing now. We've got the murder of the 6 young girls in Carroll County, Indiana, and the sex trafficking film.
Yeah, I'll try to get through this quick. I discovered in Delphi, Indiana, there were two girls murdered out in the woods, brutally murdered, 13 and 14-year-olds, back 4 years ago. When I started kind of looking at the people, the sleuths on the internet that were working that, I thought, well, this is really intriguing. I found that there were 4 young girls just 3 months earlier, little black girls, burned up in an arson in a house in the same county, about 10 miles away. Both of those cases are unsolved, and I'm real suspicious as to what's going on. So I'm heavily involved with a lot of people on the internet, with these 6 young girls that were all 6 of them murdered 4 years ago. So I'm working on that. And I wrote my first novel, which is a big deal to me. I got it up on Amazon a couple of months ago. House Secrets, if I can just plug that. Just
Of course, yeah.
Okay. That comes through, but it's House Secrets, and it has to do with my, the main character is kind of based on what I did with the bikers, and there's, it's fictional, but it's kind of based on what I did. So I'm trying to pump my book, and can't wait to write the next one.
How many books have you got now?
Well, that's the only one that's published. I'm working on another one that has to do with the death of 2 elderly women who were molested and murdered by a guy that I never could arrest. I knew who it was, spent a lot of time with him, but I could never make the arrest. I'm talking an 85-year-old woman and like a 96-year-old woman, blue-haired old ladies. He had a fascination with them. So that's my next story. And it's just in the outline stage right now.
Well, huge thank you for coming on, Perry. We've got all your links in the chat, and we'll put them below this video.
Appreciate that.
Really wish you lots of luck with your work going forward, especially this the film regarding sex trafficking to raise public awareness.
Yeah. If I can just have another couple of minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
I've been trying for a couple of years to put together a trafficking film to show how easily it is to be abducted. And I had a couple of filmmakers, but they always want money. So I tried to do it myself, and I found some volunteers to play the roles and that kind of thing. And I found some great locations. So I'm looking for, an indie filmmaker to do just a little 20, 30-minute film to put this together. And my daughter, who lives in Kansas City, went to college with a girl who was almost abducted this last weekend in Kansas City. She had a little gathering at her apartment. She walked another girl out to the Uber and to make sure she got in the car and was gone safely. And as soon as the car took off, some guy grabs her.
What?
And said, "You're going with me." And this just happened a few days ago. And this is a friend of my daughter's. So she would be like late 20s, 28, 29 years old. And this guy tried to take her. Fortunately, she had a sounding device, a siren type thing on her keychain. She sounded that and kicked the guy and was able to break loose. And it scared him enough that he let go. And she got the key into the front door and got back into the complex. So it's out there, and it happens in a number of ways. Working undercover narcotics, you meet so many prostitutes and people addicted to drugs. And so many of those girls that fall into that world they were being trafficked. They had pimps. And it's all over. And even this little town that I live in, I've had a couple of gals that have almost been trafficked when they've gone to other cities here in the last few years. So it's a huge problem. Huge problem.
Well, we
just
really
like Kevin was saying.
We really thank you for raising awareness of that, Perry. It's so important. A huge thank you for coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed being on, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Perry. Cheers. Bye-bye.